All right, guys. How's it going? This is Zach. Before I play this interview for you, I'm going to warn you that it is a little on the crackly, poppily type side. The recording, it's a great interview and it's awesome. You guys should definitely go and check out Nintendo Quest. Unfortunately, this interview has that weird sort of static popping pattern. My apologies. Hopefully, you can stick with it anyway, but and my apologies as well to the folks over at Nintendo Quest, man. Makes me sad that this interview is so weird, but I think it's still worth listening to if you can get over the crackliness. And anyways, so yeah, just wanted to give you a heads up and apologize in advance for it. So thanks.
All right, so guys, welcome to our interview. Zach and I are on the line. We're with Rob McCallum from the Nintendo Quest documentary, and we're going to spend some time talking about this documentary. And it's releasing right away. Is that right, Rob?
Yeah, it's well, all these films nowadays have a bunch of different windows. It was on Vimeo for 60 days exclusively as a digital download, and now it's on iTunes for all you Apple iOS fans, and you can also acquire it on Amazon via DVD.
Oh, that's fantastic. Excellent. So, Rob, can you kind of give us a bit of a frame of like what is the premise of the Nintendo Quest? Now, Zach and I have had a chance, but for those who are not informed, what's kind of the crutch of the story?
Well, basically, I dared my best friend Jay Bartlett to try and collect the entire NES library, all 678 original North American retail release games. Those are the games with the official Nintendo seal of approval. I dare him to do it in 30 days, and he can't use the internet in any way. Essentially because, like many collectors, he's always dreamt of having that complete collection, that whole set. And when you're friends with a guy for 30 years and it's all you hear about off and on, you get a little sick of it. So you're like, man, just do it. Just, quit getting one here and there. If you really want it bad enough, do it. If this is your dream, and those were his words, I said, then what are you going to let get in the way? What are you going to let hold you back? Let's do it, and let's capture the entire collecting process on film. And that's essentially how it all started.
So like, and I think we've all had those friends who've been in our lives for 20, 30 years, right? You're finally, you're sitting down, maybe having a couple adult beverages, and finally you're tired of hearing them whine about it. Like, was that kind of the tipping point, so to say, or was this a longer conversation? Like, and like, how did it finally come to that point of like, this is what we are going to do. You are going to do the, go collect these games. I'm going to film it, and we're done with this conversation. Like, how did it finally reach that point?
It happened really quick, actually. I had just premiered a feature-length, my first feature-length film, which is kind of like a B-movie sci-fi action-adventure called Unearthly. And post-production took 2 years because of the amount of visual effects that were involved in that. And I didn't want to have to go down that path again. I'm a huge fan of like 80s cinema, like Labyrinth, Neverending Story, Dark Crystal and stuff. And that was fun to kind of play with that. But at the budget and the constraints that we had, I didn't want to do that kind of thing again. So I want to do a documentary. I want to do something that's a little bit, more conducive to what our budgets can handle, a little bit more kind of manageable. And I talked to Jam, like, I want to do a documentary on collecting. We went back and forth on a bunch of different things. Would it be three collectors that have different collecting passions, and what are they into and why are they into it? And I had done a short film with Jay, I think in 2003, called Fanboys, that did kind of look at three collectors, very off the cuff. It was only 9 minutes long, but he was one of the guys. And he said, well, I do a lot of game hunting and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to just follow you into a store every weekend for 2 years without any kind of, big payoff. And I said, not that I don't like what's on YouTube, but everybody's doing that on YouTube. Let's do something different. Everybody is doing this, presumably, to have that complete collection. So, Jay, what if you collect everything on film? He's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, let's watch you collect an entire library. And right away, it was the NES without any discussion of, well, should it be Super Nintendo? Should it be GameCube? No, it was like, why don't you try to get, a complete NES collection? He's like, okay. And I'm like, but here's the catch. I've only got 30 days that I can afford to shoot for because I live in Las Vegas and I can't really be away from my family that long. And I got to, afford to pay other people, and I can't afford to pay them longer than 30 days. So if we're going to do this, you only have a month to do it. So the 30-day thing came out of a mechanic of actual, can we logistically do something like this? And then the no internet purchases side of it was, let's do it old school because anybody could just click a button on eBay and have instant gratification. We both think that's really what's missing or what's gone away from a lot of people today, whether it's gamers or not, where, you know, you push a button, you get a pill, you push a button, you get a pill. It's very akin to like Jurassic Park, guys, where it's like, you know, T-Rex doesn't want to be fed, he wants to hunt. It's just part of our nature to go out there, right? So I said, let's do it old school, let's see what happens.
I love that Jurassic Park reference. That is fantastic, and I think that you know the time limits, the restrictions, i.e., the 30 days, and the no internet. Plus, there was a confined budget as well, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
he was very limited to what he could afford to bring with him. It's all him, and it's all his purchases, and he sold his comic book collection. He sold a bunch of other stuff in order to get ready for day one. It's all him.
Yeah. That was I thought that was really incredible, and that 30-day limit creates this kind of like background. You know, watching the film, you know, the clock is ticking down, and you know, as a viewer, right, like you're getting anxiety, like come on, you can do it, right? Like you're rooting for Jay to complete this collection, obviously. So, as you guys were going through this process, were there any kind of challenges that you guys face? Obviously, you mentioned being gone from your family for 30 days, but anything else that maybe you didn't expect that came up during the creation of the film?
From the filmmaking side of it, it was like, wow, this kind of project requires a lot more sleep than any given hours in any single day allow for. Because, you know, you're up at 6 a.m., you're having breakfast, and you're talking about gaming all day long, which is really awesome for like 30 days with your best friend, right? Like, you can't really do anything better that's cooler than that. So you're up at 6 a.m., you have breakfast, you hit the road, you're driving to the first store, whether it's, you know, you're in the same town because you got to town the night before late, and you're driving all over the town, you know, and you're watching the clock so you can get to the next store in time, so you have enough time to get each store, because stores are generally only open, you know, 10 to 5 or 10 to maybe 9 o'clock at night. So you've really got to budget, you know, how much time you got in the travel time, and then because you have a crew of filmmakers with you, you got to let people eat, you got to let people rest, you got to make sure that they're all, you know, good to go, and then when you're done shooting the end of the day, you're either back on the road to try to get to the next city to check into the hotel, and then I had to like log the footage and look at it and make sure it was good and see what we had to do differently for the next day, and it's a marathon. That's what I really didn't expect to the degree in which a marathon would be present, because my mind was more, what am I going to be able to capture Jay doing? He'll be in a marathon, but then it's like, oh yeah, I got this whole filmmaking thing that has all these other kind of logistical concerns that have to be taken into consideration. So it's a little bit on the fly, constant, you know, reworking of the situation, the elements in the air, but it all worked out. It was a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, and that was definitely, you know, something that I don't know, Zach and I kind of both noticed during the watching is there is this level of fun, right? Like it doesn't, and I think that's a relationship that both you and Jay have fostered over, like you said, about 30 years, right? There is this genuine friendship, right? It doesn't feel like, you know, let's just watch the, you know, gorilla in the mist, right? But you're genuinely caring and asking how Jay is, going, what's going on, asking those self-reflective questions as Jay kind of goes through this journey, and I thought that was a really fantastic, you know, it very much, although it's Jay's journey, so to say, from that perspective, there is this two-man journey, this other story of your caring in that relationship as well.
Yeah, it's I'm very much the confidant or the sidekick, and a little bit more on camera than I plan to be. But in order to pull some of those emotions out of Jay, it's just easier for him to kind of have somebody to talk to. And since, you know, I'm the director, it was just naturally a good fit for me to be the best friend on camera, since I'm the best friend in real life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just fit. But yeah, those are the times where you really get to connect with a guy like Jay. And hopefully, not only Jay, but myself allows the audience to have that kind of window into what's going on. And if you guys are saying, yeah, it was fun, because it was a fun scenario, then I'm glad to hear it worked.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I think, you know, we've all probably kind of thought in some context of like, yeah, I want to collect that, right? Or at least by the end of the movie, like I start thinking, I was like, man, that'd be a really good idea. Like, I'd love to try that. And then I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. Like, my wife, that's not going to happen. But I like the fact that I saw someone else do it, and there's such a nostalgia, right, with the NES, and you mentioned earlier that so quickly you guys said that's what you're going to collect. You're going to collect NES. You're going to collect all 678 games, and the nostalgia that has been created around it, right? We were talking about in a little bit pre-show that Nintendo Dads were a show that was built with, we were kids in the 80s playing these games. Right now we're fostering gaming with our children, but there's so much of a community nostalgia around that. Can you talk about like how the community maybe impacted or influenced or assisted in this journey as well? We saw you guys coming to some of these retro game shops as well. Like, what was kind of the general reaction from the community and I guess the tellers who were there as well?
The community was really great. I mean, they really jumped on board. We had the idea about 2 weeks before our initial Kickstarter launched. So like I said, it all happened very quick. I premiered my film, I think, on May 7th. The idea was born for Nintendo Quest a week later. And then 2 weeks after that, we launched our first Kickstarter campaign. And we had to go through a few hoops because nobody knew who Jay and I were other than our immediate friends saying, no, we're not trying to raise money so Jay can buy Nintendo games. We're trying to raise money to produce a film about a guy who wants to go do that, and here are these game show-like qualifiers. And then once we kind of just kept being transparent and hammering home the same, ethos, then people were like, okay, yeah, this is cool. I will pre-order a movie for a very reasonable price like I would buy in a store or online and support you guys. And there was a few game stores. There was only 2 game stores that knew we were coming ahead of time. And they both helped us out on Kickstarter to a really great degree that just allowed the film to be possible. Flash forward after filming 2 years later, January of 2014, we launched our second Kickstarter campaign to finish up for distribution funds and basically to let people get the film on a disc because so many people had discovered Nintendo Quest between its first campaign and by that point, and everybody really embraced it because now we've had 2 years to build up our following. And it was so successful that we hit a stretch goal that allowed us to have an 8-bit NES game based on the film, and that should be coming out in about a year from now. So it'll be on actual 8-bit hardware, and you'll play as Jay going game hunting.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's awesome.
That's tremendous.
And it'll probably be like a little bit of like a turn-based RPG kind of with some Mega Man elements, and that you'll start in like a city in the center, and you can go to cities that are all around you. And essentially, you're tasked with saving all the artifacts because Digicorp Unlimited wants to take all the physical games and erase them, and they've infected the world and collectors with binary energy.
So I'm going to assume then, judging by what you're saying here, that this will probably not be a digital download that we can find on the Wii U shop.
Well, actually, here's what I will say to that, and this is something that we've talked about. You may get a digital version of this, but I don't know if you'll like the ending.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if you'll like the ending.
I like that.
Digicorp may win in the end if you like the digital version.
Very cool. Awesome. I like that. So one of the questions I kind of had is the banner to your to the artwork kind of says the official and most unofficial. I'm pulling it up right now. Sorry.
Most unofficial and unauthorized Nintendo documentary ever.
Yeah. So I love that. I was going to ask, did Nintendo at any point, or did you guys contact Nintendo? Was there any kind of communication between you two, or can you speak of that at all?
Yeah. Originally, a Nintendo rep at the local level from our hometown in London, Ontario, Canada, gave us a bunch of prizes to give away at our launch party. We had a big NES tournament with bands playing and stuff, and they said, here, we love what you guys are doing, give these prizes away. So it's kind of like retail merch that you can't just buy anywhere. So, we're talking key fobs and lanyards and like actual like store display stuff that was 6 months old past the game's release. So they gave us that kind of stuff to hand out, which was fantastic. And then we had been in contact with Nintendo, who has 2 levels of PR that you have to go through.
Yes, they do.
And essentially, what it came down to is, we love what you guys are doing. We know that this is a love letter to everything we've done in our culture, but we can't sign off on participating in this because then that sends the wrong message to everybody else that wants to do a Nintendo documentary. And because you've already created this whole project without us involved from step 1, this is just the way things have to be.
Mm.
And I totally understand it, and that's totally great. It would have been awesome to have, Reggie or someone involved. But a lot of people like yourself like the most unofficial, most unauthorized Nintendo adventure ever for a bunch of other reasons. So they're quite aware of the film. They've never sent a cease and desist. So they've been very supportive in the most passive way.
Good, yeah. Well, I mean, good that they're supportive. Not that it's a passive way, but again, we work with or we deal with Nintendo's PR part of it as well, and we kind of understand the machine works. So, and that feels very much like a Nintendo kind of stance of things. Like, it's awesome that you did it. We're not going to pull it necessarily, but we can't help you right now.
Yeah, especially since like in the past they have pulled other things, fan projects and stuff like that. So it's nice that they kind of just let you let you go with that. It kind of kind of speaks to the fact that the Nintendo creates this, has created so much, and yet when the fans run with it, it makes it so much more than it is otherwise, right? Than just what is just looking just at the games that Nintendo has created. That's great, but now look at all of the culture that has sprung up around it.
And that's just it, and that's what the film really celebrates, right? It's the NES culture and the legacy of Nintendo. It would be different if we set out to make a film that wants to tear down Nintendo or highlight elements in Nintendo's past that is maybe a little bit more contradictory to the company they are today,
Mm-hmm.
But that's not our goal, and free speech really protects documentary filmmakers a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of ground to stand on. They're being a real cool company about it so far, and c'est la vie.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, you definitely feel, and I think this kind of goes into Zach's point, it definitely feels very much kind of a love letter to the NES era, to the Nintendo era, and you can see Jay's passion and your passion for it as well coming through. Like, you can see that the 80s, the NES system really probably sculpted both of you in some way in relation to your experience as friends, in relation to your experience as gaming, and it's probably maybe played a path to where you are now currently.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the NES, I wouldn't be a filmmaker today or a storyteller by any stretch. Playing games like Final Fantasy, I didn't know the video games could tell a story that are that in depth, and it made me want to be a writer almost instantly and tell these grandiose tales of adventure where somebody could save the entire world. It's a narrative that's been around for a while, but it was because I first experienced that on a Nintendo game that set me on the path to becoming a storyteller. And it should be no coincidence that like I said a few minutes ago, that now we have a turn-based game in which you are tasked to save the world and save all the video games out there coming out. So it's all kind of coming back full circle in some respects.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So you mentioned Final Fantasy a moment ago. I'm going to ask you a question, though. Would that be your favorite NES game of all time?
That and DuckTales.
Nice.
They always kind of shift back and forth depending on the mood. DuckTales is always one of those fun games that you can pick up and put down. And DuckTales is great for so many reasons, right? It has all the Mario-ness without being a Mario game. It's a fun platformer with great combat mechanics, and yet there's tons of secret areas to explore. And it still stands as one of the best examples of a licensed property that translated to a great game, which is usually not the case when it comes to licensed content on games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Zach, what about yourself? Some questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering as well. It was interesting. I don't want to give too much of the ending away there, but more toward the end of the film, there's this sort of moment, or a few moments where Jay's really showing like this anxiety, right? That's this really emotional toll on that. And just in my personal life, I'm actually studying to be a therapist, so I'm like, oh, let's dig into this. That's sort of my instinct, and like let's check this out more. Like, it was interesting, and just sort of his emotional sort of, very clearly like an introspective kind of person. What were the sort of challenges or any good or awesome moments or challenging moments in that as well?
Well, the whole film constantly had it. I mean, and as a guy who's training to be a therapist, this film is probably a field day for you for so many levels. And I will say that, we've had some people that are skeptical. They think things are played up for drama or that we've scripted stuff. And, let me just say for the record, everything is as it appears. I mean, you can almost tell the camera's struggling to catch up and is always like a half step behind things unfolding. I don't think this film would have been possible in terms of what Jay shared on camera had I not been his friend for 30 years and built up that kind of trust. Some of the times it was just me, a camera, and Jay, and sometimes there'd be one or two other people, and I really was conscious to ease in what that experience was like for him. So like his interview was like 6 hours long, where he's like in his game room and stuff, and he talks about his dad during that same interview as he talks about the breakdown of the challenge and the dare, and it was just me and him. So, and that was the first time that we really kind of talked and started filming with him. And it's just about easing in, because I know him. I know how to make that comfortable, or try to make it comfortable, and try to make it understanding. It's a film about a video game challenge, but I think that's only what the deal is on the surface. It's about a personal journey. And then there's no again, there's no drama when he says, okay, so we're heading into the States tomorrow, and I sure hope things go well there. That's not playing it up to camera. That's him leaving his comfort zone, being afraid of being away from home.
Yeah.
He is a very homebody with like a routine, and he likes to do things a certain way, and it's like clockwork, and heaven forbid that should be messed up. So the fact that now he's going to go to another country and have to deal with people he's never ever seen or met, he has no idea what's coming his way. It's a big challenge for a guy like that, who is, very systematic in what he does day to day.
And yet it seemed like it was a really transformative experience for him too.
It was. I mean, and that's the hook for me from the beginning. Sure, I wanted to document the collecting process, but why do people collect in the first place? And what the goal did, the 30-day goal, was it set up the most interesting part of the film to me, because there was always a chance that he couldn't, make that goal, like achieve it. So, when we came up with this idea, I knew that we might not have the Hollywood perfect ending. So then I started thinking, well, what's going to be the best part? And the best part was going back to film with him 6 to 8 months later, regardless of how he does in the 30-day journey, to see who he is compared to who he was when we first meet him. Mm-hmm. How is a defeat or a success going to change this guy in the long term of things? So we're not going to spoil it for anybody out there, but if he was successful on day 30, what's he going to be like right around there? If he was, a failure on day 30, what's he going to be like right around day 30? But what's he going to be like 6 to 8 months later? What has he learned long term about this, like you said, transformative journey, this tale about a guy who leaves town and then comes home again?
Mm-hmm. It's almost, like the hero's journey sort of thing. And then
very much Joseph Campbell, man.
Yeah,
very much.
Yeah. And then there's even just like the idea, that there's this sort of theme throughout it as well, that like, you have these moments where he's looking at like a specific cartridge and he's like, there's a story behind this one, and how there's just that meaning of like, yes, he collected all these games, but really, it represents so much of how he has kind of grown as a person. Yeah, no, I think that's great. Yeah, I really love that part of the documentary for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, I found one of the things about that as well, as Zach kind of mentioned, the stories behind the cartridges. I found myself, there's a list of, I think it's the top 20, correct? The most challenging ones that he's trying to really have a difficult time finding. I found myself a couple times like, oh, I remember playing that game, and oh my god, I had that game. Why did I not keep that game?
What have I done?
What have I done to myself? But also there's in there that I really didn't know a lot about. So for example, Little Samson, I did not know much about that game, and I found myself then going and searching the internet more about it. So it kind of felt like it created a second, almost like a second or third story of as a person who was interested, like, I really want to go find that game. I want to go learn about that game, or I want to go play that game. Can I go play that game? And I found myself at times thinking, like, can you create almost like a micro journey, right? Like, can I go down to the local shop down here and collect my mini, the list of maybe 5 or 10 games on that list, it's to experience some of these things as well. So definitely rejuvenates a lot of your love as well.
And that's really great to hear, man, because as a filmmaker, it's really challenging to conquer something like the NES in a 90-minute film on top of a personal journey. So I made the decision very early on that this was going to be Jay's journey. And it's only going to be a love letter that celebrates the culture of Nintendo and the importance that system has. And this is why that system is important. This is clearly not an in-depth historical focus on a game-by-game breakdown. There's just no time for that in a 90-minute film. And 90 minutes is kind of that sweet spot for a saleable product through traditional distribution. Mm-hmm. We have some other stuff in the works kind of going forward. And we acknowledge that, and when you guys, ask me to plug that stuff, I'll tell you kind of what we're thinking in terms of that. But we want to give people more. We knew that was always going to be a problem, but we're also very delighted that people are sparked and inspired by what we have shown them to take the courage on their own to learn more, whether it's just a Google search or to get off their couch and go to their store and talk to people, because ultimately that's the inspiration we want. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And we've had like a lot of people come up to us after screenings that didn't know about the film. Like in Portland, our last theatrical screening, a mom and a son saw that it was advertised on the marquee, of the theater, and they came just because it was video game related. Didn't know anything about it, hadn't even seen the trailer. After they came up and shook our hands and thanked us, we were at a gaming expo the next day, and they came and they said, we just wanted to say thanks again, and we're here because we want to buy an NES, and we want to go hunt for games now every weekend.
Oh, wow.
Wicked.
And that's
awesome.
a story we've heard like dozens of times where this is now like a family thing for a dad and a son, or a mom and a daughter, that they want to go do because they're inspired by the tale of Jay.
Mm-hmm.
That's really incredible, actually.
That's really awesome.
Like that is awesome. So to kind of like roll out of that, as you're kind of mentioning about some of the other next projects or next pieces of this project, can you kind of give us a bit more insight into that, Rob?
Sure. I'll try to do the short version because a year ago I wouldn't have had much to say, but now I got a ton. So bear with me, listeners. The most relevant thing that's happening right now for Nintendo Quest is the Nintendo Quest Power Tour. It's our ongoing free web series where one episode drops a month. That'll conclude with 8 episodes, I believe, by June. You can check that out on YouTube or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/the-NES Club, or vimeo.com on demand, Nintendo Quest Power Tour, and you'll see Jay and I tour the film back across North America, visiting places like LA, Vegas, Edmonton, Cleveland, Columbus, and so on and so forth. And we're racing to knock a list of 10 games off that we've always wanted each, but none of us knows what's on each other's list. So, event by event, we're game hunting and talking to other people in the community. In January, we are launching a Kickstarter for a documentary on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which is probably my favorite kind of 80s toy property. We have almost everybody that you can fathom on board to participate that was part of the brand. So animators, sculptors, writers, showrunners from all iterations of He-Man, the classic Filmation stuff, the new adventures that were kind of set in space, She-Ra, the 2000X stuff, the Four Horsemen as sculptors, and so on and so forth. So that'll be a really great project to get in on. And I'm teaming up with the guys who did Turtle Power, which is the most definitive version of the Team NT legacy, which is cool.
Nice. Is that timed? Isn't there a movie coming out around there? For the movie as well?
There is a He-Man movie in the works, and we are trying to line up our project with their project in the way that the Turtle Power guys lined up their documentary with the Michael Bay release of Turtles.
Right on.
So it's there's a synergy going. I am working on a rockumentary on heavy metal band Kitty. It's chronicling their 20-year history. That'll be out later next year as they go into record possibly their last album. So examining the ever-changing landscape of the music industry, especially for an all-women group of heavy metal players. So that's an interesting one.
Nice.
My next film that comes out has me going on kind of the impossible road trip in which I team up with my brother to hit the road to see if we can find our mom who's been missing for almost 25 years.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. There's another minefield for all you therapists out there. It's called Missing Mom, and we should play at least one theatrical date around Mother's Day.
Wow,
and then
that's cool.
Then we'll roll it out after that. And then the last project that we just announced about a month ago is on box art for video games, and it's aptly titled Box Art, a gaming documentary. And with that one, we're hoping to do a 90-minute film that'll be like the initial Kickstarter goal, which will launch in May. And then the stretch goals will be more to support a web series that allow us to take the content that we shoot in conjunction for the film and expand upon it and showcase more of the interviews, more of what we've discovered. So that's where it's kind of a little bit of a two-hander. So help us get the film done, and the more that support we get, the more content people will get to learn about the process and how game cover art has changed from the inception to now, the process, the evolution, and finally answering the big question of all when it comes to box art. Who's responsible for these iconic images that have really defined gaming for the last 30, 40 years? Because most people have no idea who the artist is responsible for their favorite game.
Yeah.
And there's even a little bit in Nintendo Quest, right? That, with the
very much
with
so.
the classic Mega Man 2. I loved that.
The worst.
That was the best. I love that. So
exactly, it's the best and the worst.
Yeah.
You guys perfect. Right on. Yeah, but that's exactly where the seeds come from. So
that's super cool. Well,
so Rob, is there a lot in that update? A lot of, I know for me as a child of the 80s, for a fan of Nintendo, for a fan of video games, there's a lot that you're doing, and a fan of Mothers, there's a lot that you're doing
Go Mahomes.
that kind of connects together. Is there like a master website that we should go to support Kickstarter and to check out your work or anything?
I would love to be able to tell you to go to one place, but that site's being renovated. You can go to pyreproductions.net, P-Y-R-E productions.net. That's kind of my production company website. It hasn't been updated for a while, and we're trying to retool it. But the big websites are nintendoquest.com, boxartdoc.com, missingmomdoc.com, hemandoc.com. There's a bit of a theme there.
Perfect. Excellent. And people obviously can find you on Twitter and social media as well through all that as well.
Yep.
Perfect.
We're all linked to those sites.
Excellent. Zach, anything else for you, sir?
No, I think that's it. Thanks a ton, man. It's been great having you on.
For sure. No, I appreciate you guys reaching out and making this happen. It's always fun.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And everyone who's in the sound of our voice and this podcast, make sure you check out the Nintendo Quest. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it, search Nintendo Quest. It is well worth your time to watch this film. Watch it with your kids. It is an impactful film for Jay's journey, for Rob's journey, and for a journey of being a Nintendo fan as well. All right. For Zach, myself, and Rob, thanks, guys, for listening to Nintendo Dads.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Nintendo Dads.